John, appreciate you taking the time today. And I like to ask all my guests that have been around the game for the longest time. It always starts in the minor leagues for your professional career. Do you have a minor league story or two that you still remember till this day, all those years ago?
Yeah, there's a bunch. My career started in a unique way. I signed so late, 22nd round. Tigers drafted me. They knew I signed to go to Michigan State. I pitched a whole summer baseball, got my draft basic value up to about first round money because I wasn't going with the Tigers if I didn't get first round money. And so it worked to the last day. Monday morning, I go to college. Sunday night, I sign with the Tigers. That's how close it was. So
Wow.
I missed rookie ball and all those things you had to go to. So I joined the club for the last 30, 35 days. And I got to see big league life. Like it was like seeing a sneak preview of a movie, and you just couldn't wait to get to the movie. And so I do that, and then I go to instructional league, and I remember just being fish out of water. And my first throw, my first pitch, as I was nervous, went over the batter's head. I'm like, come on, calm down. My second pitch was going to hit him, and it hit the bat. And all I can think of is there's strike one. Here we go. And so I had to navigate a little bit of nerves and wildness. But in the minor leagues, in the Detroit farm system, we had a lot of prospects, but not a lot of success. We were terrible. Like Lakeland, we had 9 projected major league players. I think we finished 25 games out of first. Same thing in double A. Well, in double A, one of the uniqueness about having Glens Falls as your home stadium, which for those who don't know it, right field was like 380 to 420 in the corner, and left field was 260 with a big net. It just didn't make sense, the configuration. Now I realize why the White Sox farm system, when they had those sluggers, set an all-time record in homers, because they were hitting more balls to the homes behind the nets than anything else. And I remember having a really bad game, but I had a hometown umpire that was trying to make it in the big leagues. He was in the minor leagues, but he umpired me in my middle school days and my summer league days in Michigan. And I was having a hard time finding the strike zone. And I had given up a grand slam. He came out before that, and he tossed me the ball, and he said, "Hey, if you can get it anywhere close, I might be able to help you." I said, "Hey, buddy, I know, I'm trying." And then I gave up the homer, and he said, "Make sure it's under the shoulders." I said, "I'm not going to hit anybody." But that game was one of the most massive minor league brawls we ever got into. It was with the Pittsfield Cubs. And I just remember that game being kind of a low moment for me. And I was really going in the wrong direction. And I never would have guessed shortly after that I was going to get traded to the Atlanta Braves. I was 5-11 or something crazy, having a horrible year, 5 something ERA. And things were just kind of going the wrong direction. Then I get this rebirth in this trade and get traded to the worst baseball team at the time in the Atlanta Braves, but an opportunistic trade for me. And and then I kind of took off in the minor leagues. From that point on, there's a lot of things that I made changes. But my first game with the Braves, when you get traded to a club that you're traded for a big leaguer, you got to go up a level. Well, 5-11 doesn't deserve to go to AAA, and I'm facing the Tidewater Mets. And that was a fish out of water, man. Everybody stole bases on me. I lost track of everything. That team was loaded. And it's what I when I talk about the minor leagues, I think about perseverance and failure. Failure motivated me to want to be great, and perseverance was the key to getting through all of those things that don't go exactly right. So I'm very fond, even though it was only 2.5 years in my minor leagues, it taught me so much about myself and how to climb and make adjustments year in and year out. And every off season, I did whatever was necessary to get better, which therefore in instructional league allowed me to make the next club. Like in theory, I should have repeated some levels,
Right.
but 7 and 8 in my first year at Lakeland, went to instructional league, did great, made the double A team. 5-11, get traded to the Braves. I probably should have gone back to the double A uh, squad, but I did great in instruction league, made the triple A team, so on and so forth.
Yeah, the reason why I love bringing up the minor league times, right? One, there's always a story that goes along in there, and also the fact that you were, less than 12 hours or so, maybe even we can even say it's shorter than
Yeah.
that, not even signing. And then on top of it, there's John Smoltz almost starting brawls, being involved in brawls. You didn't throw any haymakers in that one, did you?
I didn't. In that brawl, there was we had a guy that was notorious for some things, and I heard screaming like I've never heard under the pile. And I guess what he was doing was biting guys. This pitcher hit somebody, and he got charged the mound, which created a brawl. And under the scrum, he was biting guys. And so when
Ooh,
the guys got separated, of course they wanted to go after him, and he had a bat, and somebody threw him a bat, and he was going to swing this bat. It was awful. And in those days, back in those days, Glen Falls, the clubhouses were in straightaway center.
yeah,
So they ejected both guys. One went down the left field line, the other one went down the right field line. Guess where they were going to meet?
right in the
In
middle.
center field. And they realized it a little too late. And we had to run out to that center field where they were going to go at it again. So we had to lock our guy in the clubhouse. You could literally lock him from the outside in because he had lost his mind. And that was a massive brawl that did not it was not pretty. And I didn't start it. I was out of the game already, but my our umpire just said, hey, he could sense things were getting a little hostile. He said, below the shoulders. I said, I'm not hitting anybody.
So to correction, John Smoltz, not the fire starter here. Didn't
No.
finish it, but he got to experience what everything went down. And look, it's funny to me. One, you already always hear about being at the bottom of a pile in sporting events. You hear it with football. Heck, baseball, whatever it is. I've heard a lot of things. I can add that to the list.
Yeah.
And, the game's changed a little bit. They don't allow that as much. But
No.
you're right about the minors where, especially at the time when you were coming up, it was an eye-opening experience. Everyone looks at the big leagues. Everyone looks at professional baseball, which it's an honor. It's a privilege to get there. No doubt about it. But you're still to try to get to that glamorous, what people look at, lifestyle, takes a lot of work, takes a lot of failure. It takes a lot of days where you wake up and maybe you're questioning how you got to go out there and do it again and maybe be better than the day before. And how do you wash away some tough times? And that's why I like to bring that up because, John, you went down as being one of the best that ever did it. Go to the Hall of Fame. The career speaks for itself. And not only what you did as a starter, being a reliever, which we'll get all into, but I think it's nice when people hear that, hey, even the greats have moments where they weren't great, but they learned how to persevere, like you said. And you mentioned being a Michigan guy. What was it like for John Smoltz growing up in Michigan as a kid then, Were you just a baseball guy? Or did you have other aspirations on top of that?
Yeah, my first love was basketball. I grew up in a musician's family. My mom and dad were both musicians. They taught the accordion, not so popular today. So I grew up playing the accordion at 4 years old to about 7. But my dream was to play sports. We didn't grow up in a sports family. They allowed me to play. I self-taught. I'm self-taught at everything I've ever done, and basketball became my passion. Well, when your mom's small and Italian, your dad's small, you don't think, okay, you don't know, right? I tell people all the time, like, you can have aspirations to be XYZ, but sometimes, and more than likely, the sport chooses you versus you choosing the sport. Well, I grew to be 6'3", which is crazy because I'm the tallest person in my entire extended family going back generations. And I started out playing basketball and baseball, and I played some football as well as a quarterback. So I played the 3 sports that the seasons of Michigan, which were perfect for me because we didn't have year-round sports. We didn't
Mhm.
have year-round baseball. I played a minimum amount of games, that the summer would allow, and then turned to basketball and turned to football. And I think for all those things that I learned, each sport served me well in some capacity. And for baseball, I just had this gift of throwing a baseball that nobody would have known, and I wouldn't have known. And I had, kind of genetics, loose genetics, and grew up, idolizing the Detroit Tigers and watching every game they played and emulate every pitcher, Jack Morris, Milt Wilcox, Dan Petrie, all the guys. Can you remember Frank Tanana? And I think about that, and what I did was pursue a path of passion. I pursued a path of I was going to avoid everything that came in the way that was going to take me away from my goal, and that included friends. Because you can get caught up in the historical numbers of how impossible it is to make it, and kind of just have fun and go about your life with no real disciplines or guardrails. And I put them up right away because, I didn't do anything that was going to get me away from this goal. And so getting ultimately through the trials and playing 4 years of varsity baseball and playing basketball at a high level and making an all-state team and going to Michigan State to play both sports, it would intrigue me. And the 4 weeks of negotiations, getting to the point of trying to make up my mind, I was just going kind of crazy as a 16, 17-year-old trying to figure out what do I want to do. And then ultimately making that decision at Sunday night. I'll say this, there's not many college coaches in the world that would have helped me make that decision to sign like Tom Smith did at the time at Michigan State. He said, John, if you get first round money, you need to go. As bad as I want you here, I was going to be their first ever full scholarship player. He
Mhm.
said it would be an injustice for you not to go if you feel like you're ready. And that helped. That took the pressure off. My dad did all the negotiating. And it was a dream, man. It was like to play for your hometown team and to see them. They just won the World Series in '84. I was at the game. And to pull it and put it in full context, my grandfather worked on the ground crew for over 13 years. I grew up around Tiger Stadium. He would let us in the stadium. We'd sit until someone said, "Excuse me, those are our seats." And we just kept bopping around. So I went to the World Series game 6, where Gibson hits the home run off of Goose Gossage, and they win the World Series. And believe it or not, people went on the field, stormed the field. They don't do that anymore, of course. And they were ripping up the infield sod for whatever reason why they thought that was cool. And they were throwing it, back towards the stands. So my brother and I got like 3 pallets, 3 square, you know, big parts of sod, and we planted it in our backyard as tiger grass. That was the infield. And so we put a tiger statue over the grass. And full circle, conveying, when I got traded, and they before then they let my grandfather go before his time was up, and he just wanted to finish the year. Then I got traded. I came home in the off season. This tiger statue was gone, and my dad had ripped up the grass. He was so mad. And lo and behold, I would never know that the opportunity to play for the Braves and TBS, that my family would actually get to see me play more than they would as if I was playing at home for Tigers.
It's crazy how that works out. And that's where I was going to lead next because, it is a kind of, I want to say it's a fairy tale, but, being able to play for the team you grew up rooting for. And also the
Yeah.
fact that you got pieces of tiger grass right there from the game and you planted that for all those years. That's a really that's a really cool experience. Now, obviously, then you found out the business of baseball. Hey,
Yeah.
John, appreciate you. Uh,
Yeah.
you're gone, and I know in that case for the for the Tigers, they made a decision, right? They have to look at who they have that can help them now, and if I'm not mistaken, like you said, the Braves were in a different position than they were. So
Yeah.
we'll take a chance on this guy that has potential, but we don't know what it's going to be. Was that when you realized what the business was of baseball right there? Were you able to then take the emotion out of it after time?
Yeah. Yeah. I was passionate about being a major league player, but then it shifted into being a Tiger. And you
Yeah.
can get clouded and misguided in your mission, because when I got traded, I looked at it wrongly. I looked at it as I wasn't wanted.
Hmm.
Because when you're having a bad year and you get traded by your home club, you're like, it's easy to look at it like you weren't wanted, but that somebody else wanted you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to look at that. It took a 14-hour drive from Glens Falls, New York to Richmond, Virginia for me to reassess my goals, redetermine. Like I'm big. If you follow my entire career, people don't
Mhm.
understand the pitfalls and the valleys that I actually were in. And I'm big at digging myself out. Like I've dug many holes for myself. And then the goal is to get out, get out of that hole and rally yourself. And I was in the first rallying stage of my career. I never knew this was going to be a theme throughout my career. And so I had to put my big boy pants on. My dad said, "Hey, I'll fly down. We'll drive with you." I go, "No, Dad, I got to do this myself. I have a lot of things to think about." And when I got to Richmond, Virginia, I realized holy cow, this is a big league stadium. It's the first big league stadium I've ever seen. And I realized the potential of now I'm wanted by somebody. Now they need pitching. So my goal still is intact. I need to be a Major League Baseball player. It's
Yeah.
just now going to be for a different team. I don't know anything about anything other than Hank Aaron and Dale Murphy. That's it. And I got there and I just refocused and rededicated the journey. I got great instruction from their overkill of coaches. When I was in Detroit, we didn't have any coaches. We had one manager. That's it. No hitting coach, no pitching coach for 2 years. And they had a motto that the 1928 Yankees didn't need it, so we don't need it. It was bare bones. It was
Wow.
a disservice to a lot of the young talent that, again, I talked to 8 or 9 projected major league players. Guess what? 7 of those were on other teams. They made it, but not with the Tigers. And so
Wow.
when I got to Atlanta, I had Leo Mazzoni and Brian Snitker and Bobby Cox was the GM and had all these coaches available at our fingertips. And it really served me well. And Leo did a big part in changing my confidence and creating better pitches because he said my mechanics was fine. And I was a mess in Detroit. You know, Billy Muffett, the big league pitching coach, while I was there, changed everything about me. I remember calling up my dad and I said, Dad, I'm no good. He's like, what do you mean? I said, obviously, they don't like my mechanics. They don't like the way I'm doing things. They're trying to change me into things that feel uncomfortable. I'm trying it all. I'm going to give it all. But I was a mess. I
Mhm.
couldn't throw the ball any close to the strike zone. And so when I got to Atlanta, Leo said, throw me an athletic pitch. I said, really? He just said, I don't want you to think about your mechanics. I want you to throw me an athletic pitch. And I did. And he goes, that's beautiful. And I was kind of like, really? I was still beaten down. I'm like, really? He goes, that's beautiful. I'm telling you, that's a beautiful delivery. We need to upgrade your pitches. And I said, awesome, all in. And so I never really thought about mechanics again. And I really upgraded my pitches. Detroit told me that my curveball was too big. I couldn't throw it. So I basically had a fastball and a slider, and that's it. And so I brought back my curveball. I developed pitches as I went on. And look, my career took a turn that I would have never guessed. And you know, I knew the backstory now from why I got traded. And it's one of the most incredible. And you got to imagine that GMs do this a lot. Like, this is not just a one off story.
Mhm.
Bill LaJoy, who's no longer with us, was the general manager of the Tigers. And the scout finally told me the story of how I got traded. He says, you want to know the real story on how you got traded? I said, yeah. Well, the backstory before he told me was I had an issue. I didn't personally have an issue with Bill, but our negotiations went so long and were so complicated that some of that language didn't get to him, I guess, when I signed. And my first full week of spring training, I got called in and lambasted, yelled at, screamed at. I'm 18 years old and I'm like, Bill, I don't know why you're so mad. Whatever you work out with my dad, he's just so adamant that I can guarantee you make this. And you, because I had an addendum to my contract that paid me extra money in my second and third year, which in theory, they said, you have to trust us. We can't put in the contract. I said, I trust you. And so here I am getting screamed at. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know what's going on. Well, that's the backstory. So that when the trade happens, the scout that signed me was begging Bill not to trade me because the Braves wanted one of 2 or 3 pit. They didn't care who they got. They just wanted a pitcher for Doyle Alexander. And the top rated prospect in Detroit was a guy by the name of Steve Searcy, left-handed pitcher. I guess I was second or third top prospect. And the Braves were like, we'll take whoever. And so the scout's begging Bill Joy not to trade me. And he goes, the heck with it. Give him Smoltz. Just like that. And so the heck with it became one of the most incredible trades for me personally. And I like to think for the Atlanta Braves, the Tigers got what they needed in Doyle Alexander. He went 9-0 and actually lost the playoff game to go 9-1. And the rest is history. Or otherwise, I would have been maybe stuck in Detroit, developed later, maybe not had the career, who knows. And so I look back to that moment and to get the full circle story of that trade was incredible. The scout quit, went on to Seattle, and was able to tell me that story in full detail
Wow.
about 8 years after I retired.
Well, how about that? The heck with it, John. You know,
Yeah, he used a different terminology than
I
I
am sure, I am sure, and especially being around the baseball world, I could put 2 and 2
did.
together.
Yeah.
The words he said. you like to believe that people will take emotion out of
Yeah.
business. It's not the case. I mean,
No.
this game, John, there's the human element, and obviously we can talk about that later on about the analytics to
Yeah.
the human element of the game when in all facets now. But even when it comes to business, it sometimes can be very hard for certain individuals because in theory you got to try to keep that out of it, but the reality is people remember things. I'm just laughing thinking about here's a 18-year-old John
Yeah.
Smoltz just getting roasted left and right. Be like, what did I do? I just showed up here. I'm trying to figure
Yeah.
out how to be a professional athlete. And I'm in there and I'm trying to figure out what the hell I got to do to get my stuff together. You mentioned about your struggles in the Tigers organization. Do you know your ERAs or right around them for the 4 levels that you got to, or 3 levels?
Yeah, they weren't great early on. I believe I was 7-8 my rookie year
Yep,
in
7 and 8.
Lakeland,
Mhm.
and it was horrible in my second year in Glens Falls. I want to say 5-11. Does that sound about right? Or
4 and 10,
4-10?
Yeah,
Okay,
1
so
less
they're
win, 1 less loss,
yeah. So 4-10, and I think the ERA started with a 5.
It did 5.68.
Yeah, so that's not great. I had a great AAA with the Braves. I think I was 11-5 when I got called up, somewhere in that degree. Is that right?
Yeah,
In
so
AAA?
I'll read it out for you just because I think it's fascinating with everything you just talked about. Lakeland, 7 and 8 when you were 19 years old. You had a 3.56. That was your lowest ERA that you had with the Tigers, 7 and 8 record. Then when you were in Glen Falls, you had a 5.68 ERA and went 4 and 10. And then when you went to Richmond for the 3 games that you pitched there, you had a 6.19 ERA.
Yeah.
And sure enough, when you had your first full year going over to play in Richmond with the Braves, you go 10-5 and have a 2.79 ERA. And there's so much that I could unpack from this, John, that makes me a little bit giddy because I love the fact nowadays where we want to look at, all right, hey, maybe if you throw it a certain way, mechanical. All that I heard from the Braves for you was be athletic, and prove it. Just go out
Yeah.
there and do it, and then you learn by the reps. And it wasn't trying to get so calculated. Now, of course, obviously, I bet when you're trying to fine tune some things, but the approach I think is simple.
Yeah.
Simple message, but you knew that they had the right intentions. And we know in baseball, simple is better than complex. You're able to simplify the game, you have more success. And you know what? For the Tigers, good for them with the deal. And I think it's better for what happened with you with the Braves. And I mean, shoot then, John. Then you are brave. And then,
Yeah.
with TBS and people are watching constantly, then the Braves become pretty damn good. What do you remember from your first time being a big leaguer, knowing you're going to have that opportunity? Does that still resonate with you in your mind of those first moments of that dream becoming a reality?
It does. I had something happen recently that I didn't put too much stock in. I just figured it was another appointment. They wanted me to throw out the first pitch in Richmond because the stadium is no longer going to be. They're going to build it across the street. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, that'll be cool. I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. And, it's 37 years ago. And so I go out to throw the first pitch out, which I really don't ever want to do again because my shoulder doesn't work and it's actually awkward to throw a ball. But then I realized like that was the last game I ever pitched in the minor leagues was in Richmond. And that's when I got called up. And the way it happened was so unique. I know there's a strategy behind it today with all these young, it's on YouTube and it's all these social media. But we had a payphone in the clubhouse. That's how long ago it was. And I remember this particular day because there was a reporter for the Gwinnett News that wanted to talk to me. And honestly, it was the day I was pitching. Normally, that doesn't happen very often. And I answered the phone, and he goes, "Hey, what do you think? How does it feel?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "Oh, come on, it's got to be great. Tell me about it." I said, "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "They haven't told you yet?" And I went, "Told me what?" And he goes, "Uh-oh." He goes, "You're getting called up." And he goes, "I guess you're going to have to fake it when the manager tells you." So I actually kind of got spoiled to, like it spilled the beans. So I'm like, what do I do? What do I say? I'm like, well, okay, I'll talk to you later. And then I got called in by Jim Beecham, who was our manager at AAA at the time. And he called me shoot fire. He says, "Shoot fire, you're only going to have 75 pitches in tonight's start." And I was like, acted dumb. I'm like, "Why?"
Huh.
He goes, "Because you're going to the show." And so I got excited and smiled. And I go, "That's awesome." So I think back, I throw out the first pitch, and then I remember pitching that game. It was 5 innings, it was 55 pitches, 15 up, 15 down, perfect game. I wanted to keep going. He was like, "No, that's it." And I go, "You said I had 75 pitches." And so I know I'm going to go to the big leagues, and I'm going to face the New York Mets, which ironically was the first team I faced when I got traded to the Atlanta Braves. And I'm pitching on Tom Seaver Day. And, all those things play through your head. You're like, you get called up, you leave your apartment, you race to this airport, you get in to meet your new teammates, and you're going to pitch what you hope is a good game. It ended up giving up a run in the first inning. I want to give up 2 hits. I went 8 innings. That's how far long ago that was, because they let guys go that long in their debuts. And I win. But everything we talked about was going to, as I look back, is a full circle of my career. I pitched into the 9th inning, my second game, give up a game tying homer to lose. And then I go 2-7. I don't make it out of the 3rd inning, like 3 starts in a row. And it was like hitting copy and repeat. Like, this was my minor leagues. This was the adjustments I got to go through. I go to the off season. I think, man, I gotta make the adjustments. I got to get better. And my first full year, I ended up being the only representative in the All-Star game, which was so unique, so surreal. I think I won 11 games in the first half, and in the second half, I only win 1 game. So this roller coasters happen into my career. And as we're talking, to even come full circle, I have a kind of a beef with my new general manager in 1991, John Smoltz, and I'm on the opposite side of the recipient of letting emotions make the best of. I walk out of camp, I'm disappointed. I got my contract renewed. I'd won 15 games the year before on a team that lost a ton of games. I was very disappointed in the business side of it. And I took that into the season, and I changed my philosophy. I own it. I made a bad mistake, and I start out 2-11, and I'm at the cusp of everyone's call of sending me down, putting me in the bullpen. Bobby Cox is now the manager. He was my GM. He said, "I believe in this kid. I know he's going to turn it around." It's the best 2-11 season any pitcher could have. And what was happening was, I took my negotiations out to the mound every single game. And I was going to show my general manager why he made a horrible decision in renewing my contract when I was days away from arbitration available. Well, that didn't work. I got in a severe mental funk and a slump. And per his request, I was willing to talk to a sports psychologist. It was a simple process. It got overblown. The stories were never even close to the reality. It just flipped me back into the person that I was and the confident person that I was. I go 12-2 in the second half. I virtually don't lose the last 2 months of the season, and pitch those 3 most significant games. And what it told me was, the game's hard. You know this, and we all go through stretches.
Yeah.
That if I can get out of that, I can get out of any situation, and I can make the necessary changes, adaptations. And as I look back again, all the way back to Richmond, to the full caption of my career, man, it was not what everyone sees on the back of my car and the plaque in Hall of Fame. It was not a road where it was just like smooth. It was grit, grind, recover, perseverance, doing a job I didn't want to do, making changes I necessarily weren't like fired up to do. But at the end of the day, it served me well in completing my unique career.
Yeah. And then the mental side is a gigantic part of it. Because what I just heard right there, John, was your focus was not saying it was somewhere else, but you wanted to prove something that maybe put too much pressure on yourself. And we can probably see it nowadays. That part hasn't changed at all.
No.
Right now, where we look at guys, and that's that human element. You think these guys are so talented. Why are they slumping when they're up for a contract? Do they believe that their worth's higher? Well, I think you answered that question perfectly, because sometimes your mind goes to a different place. You get into a funk. And I remember at times, and this is not an exaggeration, John, I would have times where I was in such a bad headspace. And for me, with the name Ripken growing up,
Yeah.
I dealt
Yeah.
with the expectations, and I'll be honest, I didn't know how to handle them at times. And I got to a point in the minors where I couldn't even figure out how to properly hit a ball off the tee. I was so domed up, and they're saying, "Oh, work on your mechanics." The best example I had for that was when I went and played for the Aberdeen Ironbirds in 2017 after I got released and went through all of my real struggles, where my mechanics were the worst I ever felt in my career. But it was probably the best I felt mentally, and I hit for the highest average I did. And Tim Raines Jr. was my hitting coach. And Tim Raines Jr. said, I would rather you know what you want to do at the plate mentally than worry about anything that's going on with your swing. He goes, you make a plan, you stay focused, and you keep your mind focused on just that. Let's see what you can do. And from then on, I went, wow, okay. Now, of course, if you have good mechanics and you're able to put things together, right? Like, that helps. But, fair to say, John, you've seen so many fantastic players. Not always the most talented guys end up being the superstars for whatever reasons, because they're not able to get past that human element or get out of their own head, so to speak.
Well, I think, as we look at computers, viruses can get in a computer, and if you don't get it out, computer's not going to work. And your mind works the same way. We go into slumps, and no one talks about the mental slumps that people go into that are real. And no one wanted to talk about it. I became kind of the poster child for an over exaggerated scenario. Like, no one was laying me on a couch and had a watch and was TikTok, and it was none of that. He wasn't transforming into a pitcher I never could be. It was getting me back to the pitcher I always was. And what happens in sports, and I do this in golf now all the time, I'll tell my caddy, don't ever tell me, do not tell me where not to hit it, because your brain doesn't conceivably understand. If you say, don't hit it left, your brain thinks about left. It hit it left. It doesn't process don't. So everything that I did from that point on was a positive command on the mound. And I would work off of those mental strengths, because I was always mentally tougher than anybody in my age group, because I wanted to be. But then when you get in that slump, you figure, like, what's going on? And then you start working the word don't hang a slider. Well, you're going to hang a slider. I tell my catchers, if you want the ball down, tell me bury it down. Give me a command. Don't give me, hey, don't hang this pitch. So I think a lot of those things served me well for not only pitching the three biggest games of my life, but what I didn't tell you is that I prepared my whole upbringing of pitching in game sevens. I pitched a game seven every day outside my house with a rubber ball and a wall. I tell people all the time that I created my own palace of, like, this is what it's going to be like. And I'm not into, like, if, you create it, it'll always happen. But if you do not think it, you're never going to believe it. If you don't believe it, you never dream it. If you never dream it, you're never going to achieve it. You got to set forth places in your mind where you want to go. You can't be unrealistic. I can't tell you I'm going to be a hair model when I don't have any hair on top of my head. You got to be realistic. And I think what I created for those game sevens was exactly that. I want to be the guy. I'm the guy that wants the ball. I trust me more than anybody else, not a selfish, arrogant way. And that when I got to those moments, I was lucky enough to pitch three. I almost pitched the fourth, seventh game, but I pitched 3 seventh games, gave up 2 total runs, and only won 1. The sports can be cruel, but I was able to deliver under the moment because I wasn't afraid to fail. I wasn't nervous. This is where I wanted to be. The places are packed. Millions of people are watching. None of that mattered, because this is what I created from 7 years old on. And if I could still throw a baseball, I believed I could pitch till I was 46 years old. But you know what? The things that matter to me in competition are setting forth your mind first. Now, if you can't do something really well, it's hard to kind of go to that next level. You got to have some talent to be able to do these things. Like, I would never tell you I can play in the, PGA Pro Tour. That's not going to happen. I'm a pretty good golfer, but it's not like I'm falsifying, the reality. I just want to get better at what I do.
Yeah. Well, also, by the way, speaking of golf, I heard you're a very damn good golfer. I think if we did a poll on all baseball players that end up playing golf, I think you might be at the top of the leaderboard, John. Like, that's for a whole separate conversation. I don't know if that's just a pitcher's thing. You guys had a little bit more time or whatever it was. I heard I wouldn't want to play against you. I will say it that way for the amateurs here, for us. Can you just explain real quickly? I'm fascinated with the Game 7 that you were throwing a ball against the wall. From a young kid? So every time you just go out, just yourself.
Just myself. I'd go outside our home in Lansing, Michigan, about 45 feet away. We had a small screen door that entered the house, and then a brick wall, let's just say 7 feet wide. I'd put a tape strike zone on that brick wall. I had the real good rubber balls back in the day where you throw it and it comes back in the same shape.
Mm-hmm.
And I would pitch. I was everything. I was the announcer, the GM, the manager, the grounds crew, the star player. I was everything in my mind. It was a brick wall in me, and I imagined facing all the top contemporary players of the day. And I went 99-1. I tell people this all the time. Like, I threw in a fluke loss, but I set the stage for what I believed it was going to be like. My parents wouldn't let me go any farther than the curb. And so I learned how to command a ball because I would hit the screened-in door too many times, and my mom would come out yelling. She goes, "If you don't learn how to get this ball in the brick wall in that strike zone, you need to find a new place to play." And so I grew up on that.
Yeah.
I grew up in a way where it's called strikeout baseball. That's what we learned. It was basically you and your buddy against a chimney. We put out cones for single, double, triple homer. So wherever you hit the ball would determine where no running, just kind of. And so ironically, we created this facility that we're going to open up in June in Lansing, Michigan, not too far from where I grew up. We built a stadium that's called Strikeout Baseball in honor of my name is on it, which I'm honored. It has a 20-foot wall. It's the size of an infield. It's a brick wall with a strike zone. You can play one-on-one baseball. What we found is that baseball is hard to play for young kids. To play pickup baseball, you got to find too many players. It's an expensive sport to play. This is going to be all for the kids in the inner city of Lansing. They're going to be able to play 1-on-1 to 5-on-5. All the action's on the wall, and it kind of brings me full circle to how I grew up in Lansing, and I'm excited about it. But that's how I started my Game 7's philosophy. So when I got on the mound for my first ever Game 7 in Pittsburgh, I was at total ease. Everyone else was nervous. They didn't want to talk to me. I'm like, guys, this is no big deal. It's not the last game we're ever going to play. Like, this is where I want to be.
I love the creativity. And maybe just because I recently spoke with Ozzie Smith about how he learned on first step quickness, because I try to throw a ball over the house. I'm like, did you ever catch it? He goes, no, but it didn't stop me from trying to get it. And
Right.
I worked on being as quick as I possibly could to see what I could do. So I think those are the fun stories where we always want to look of how you can get better as a player. Oh, I need to have all these great options at my disposal. Reality is you don't. You just need to be committed to what you want to do and make the best of the opportunity that you have with what you have. So I love that. That is phenomenal. And it makes sense, John, of where you got to today. You're very driven, focused, the mental side. That's mostly what I'm hearing. And yes, you were pretty damn good. You had some good stuff, to say the least. I mean, hell, you were the Braves in general. There was that stretch of you, Maddox, Glavine.
Yeah.
A pretty good trio. Is that, you can be biased if you want. Is that the top trio for a time? Is that it's got to be one of the best. But what was it like out there that you had multiple guys that could just take over a game? You're looking for, when we talk about having an ace.
Yeah.
You guys had aces. It's incredible when I think about what we see now to what was back then.
Yeah, we had a different reward system. We're rewarded to pitch deep in games, pitch a lot of innings. I believe the numbers are for about a 3 to 5 year period. We pitched 75 to 78% of the total innings. as starters, and obviously that doesn't happen today. The bullpens are taking the majority of it.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of pride in that. And I think the biggest thing is we put our egos, in our back pocket when we walked in the locker room, because each day you could be humiliated if you wanted to be the guy. I know there's some things thrown around loosely times where he's the ace, and we didn't care. And for a 10-year period, I'd be hard pressed to find a greater group of three to do the run that we were on, because we all stayed healthy. I was the first one in 10 years to miss a start. Ended up having Tommy John eventually. They stayed healthy, and obviously there's conversation of whether they would even exist today. Would they get drafted? Are we missing out on great pitchers? And we are. But that's the reward system we had then. We had the time of our lives. We all personally loved to play golf. We would spend a lot of time on the golf course and do the things in between starts that made us comfortable. But you know what we did that nobody really talks about? We were a perfecter of our craft, where we threw a lot off the mound. We didn't do a lot of flat ground throwing. Every time we wanted to pitch, and pitching was the purpose, we threw off the mound 70%. So majority of my career, for about a 10-year period, I threw twice in between starts. Think about that today.
Yeah.
And the health that sustained for us, because we were familiar with the strike zone. We got in our office a lot. That was our office. The flat ground is not our office. You've got to learn the stresses of the slope, and to repeat your mechanics. Nobody did it better than Glavine and Maddox. And I was close third behind when it came to mechanics. I had more stuff than they did, but they had more precision. And the artistry of pitching was magnificent to watch. And I think Greg had one of the greatest mechanics ever. His head was stayed perfect. He could field his position. He threw the ball where he wanted to. But that was our day. That was what we were taught to do. Could we all throw a little bit harder? Yeah, absolutely. I never max effort pitched my entire career. And people go, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "Well, I didn't. I cruised at 94. And if I needed 96 or 97, I could turn it up and amp it up against some of the greats. But I would never last. And, pitching 254 and 56 innings, and pitching 41 innings in the postseason that same year, nobody brainwashed us to think we were going to break the next year. Nobody said that, you can take time off and you relax. We did it for 14 straight years. We went to the postseason. There were no hangovers. There were no what ifs. There were no coming to spring training and everyone worried. We have a brainwashing going on, because the evidence of injuries is brainwashing these guys. But at the same time, they're asking them to do something that's impossible to sustain. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So, yeah, that was 100 years ago, but it was so much fun. There's staffs today that would blow us away. We're probably ranked today maybe 15th on stuff. Maybe not even that. But it doesn't matter. So whoever's the greatest staff today, they're not economically staying together for 10 years. Physically, they can't stay together for 10 years.
No.
And so that model of reward system is flawed. They know it, but that's what they've chosen to go with.
Yeah, that's where the game has changed too. And also, I want to point out there for the record, I'm still a big believer. You know what you're doing on the mound. I don't care how hard you throw. The guys that throw hard and have the stuff that we just talked about, you can miss more and get away with it if you execute well enough, right? Like, being in Baltimore, Felix Bautista, when he's healthy and he's getting there, he throws 100, and then he's got a nasty split. Well, if you just tell, hey, Felix, throw it in the zone and dare them to hit that, and then throw your splitter off of that, he's going to have more success. But then a guy like that just came over from Japan, and Tomoyuki Sagano, Tommy, as he's getting called here, he's got to be able to mix and match his stuff.
Yes.
Guy, if he gets lucky, he might get to 94. Most times he's sitting 92, 93, but there's a value in that. The goal at the end of the day, get him out. Get him out, be successful. But the reward system, I think, is the biggest part there. I still think that Braves, to finish the point about that team or that era for you guys, I hate that some people diminish that as far as we could have won more World Series. Well, no crap. I mean, everybody is. And I think Mark Teixeira was telling me this, which I thought was just a great point. We know how hard winning is, and we know how great the Yankees organization has been. And as great as New York's been, they've only won a world championship once in the last 16 years.
Yeah.
and they could have won. And the best team on the season usually isn't the team that ends up winning the whole thing. It's a team that's playing well at the right time. Does that ever bother you at times when people maybe try to downplay? Because you just said 14 straight postseason appearances.
Yep.
What was the division titles? How many division
14
titles?
in a row. 14 in a row. Yeah.
John, that's
I think
insane.
I think it's the narrative of sports. It's the one thing that is the biggest pet peeve of mine now that I've even been away from the game.
Yeah.
We always talk about greatness and what somebody hasn't done when it's been in greatness. Look at Rory McIlroy, one of the greatest golfers in the planet, but he had never won the Masters. Why is that the focus? There's only 5 or 6 in the history of the game that's done that. Now, if there'd have been 100 people that done that, maybe it has more relevance. But now the burden's been lifted off of him for no reason other than the burden's been put on him for stupid reasons.
Yeah.
Like, why are the Buffalo Bills considered a failure? It's one of the few teams ever to go to 4 straight Super Bowls. Yeah, they didn't win. But I think the thing that we are going to be remembered for, try to win 14 divisions in a row. It's hard, very hard. It's probably an elite category. The Dodgers came close. Technically with the Giants in that one historic year, took the division from them, but they got a pretty good streak going right now. The thing that is amazing is that when we went through our run, and when you individualize each season, your mind is blown by the what ifs and how come it didn't happen. In 1991, we lose 4 one-run games. Okay, we lose an epic Game 7. There's a bunch of twists and turns that could have happened. We had bases loaded in the 8th inning, nobody out, didn't score. In a 0-0 game, that was my Game 7. We had plenty of opportunities. We just didn't get it done. In 1992, we lose 4 one-run games in the World Series. Okay, we lose 4 to the Toronto Blue Jays. Last game being 3-2. So our first 8 World Series, we all lose by 1 run. 93, we get beat by a Philadelphia team. That was the best team we ever had, and we should have won, and we didn't. We had bases loaded in my game, 2-1 in the 9th, nobody out against Mitch Williams, and we lose. We don't score.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I look back is we were kind of pre-analytical offense before this new age has come in. We struck out too much. We didn't put the ball in play, but we relied on our pitching, and we were always going to be in close games. I think the amount of 1-0 games in postseason that we played is it's unbelievable. And ironically, we won our only World Series on a 1-0 gem by Tom Glavine. Even in 1998, we were ahead in the first 3 games against the Yankees and got swept 4-0.
Yeah.
Those kind of things just don't pop out, and you don't individualize them because it's just the totality of it is we didn't win enough championships based on our pitching. But what I would tell you, and this is not an indictment on the players we had, we, through our run, were shuffling the rosters, and I would say we were actually rebuilding, but our pitching kept us in it, and we kept qualifying because of our pitching. We had offenses that had no business statistically to get to the postseason, but our pitching kept us there. So that sustainability was pretty incredible in how we went about our pitching, and it gave the team a chance without a lockdown bullpen and without a bunch of 300 hitters, the ability to win a lot of games because we were in a lot of games. So we were playing for the home run. And if we ran into a few of them, but here's the kicker. In 1995, we win a World Series. We keep our team together. In 1996, we're up 2-0 against the Yankees and don't win another game. And I lose another 1-0 unearned game against Andy Pettitte in Game 5. We lose that series. What people don't recognize is that spun the Yankees into 4 the next 6 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
We would have won back-to-back. We now trade 4 key players after 96. You can't trade them if we're back-to-back champions. And that's the spiraling situation of what happens when you don't get it done. And so we went in another direction. We made a bunch of trades, but we still got back to a couple more World Series. And 2 of them we probably didn't deserve to get to.
The thing that I like to tell people, you have to live and die by what the strengths of your team. And usually if the strength of your team is pitching, you're going to have a chance to be in a lot of games, win a lot of games. That's just the nature of the business. The other element, which is always overlooked, it's not that your offense needs to be humming. It's not that, well, I say you got to have your defense. I got to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Defense, you need it because you don't play defense, you're screwed. But it kind of goes into the point that I think it's undervalued is situational ball. What you just
Absolutely.
mentioned, bases loaded, having opportunities, runners in scoring position, getting them in, however that is. The team that executes the best situationally typically ends up winning the ball game. And all those situations that you just described perfectly exemplifies what happened and what could have been for the Atlanta Braves and what did become for a team like the New York Yankees and some of these other teams down the stretch. And that's why when we talk about the best teams, the best teams might not be the best team at that moment because their pitching gets cold or they're just not executing well in the situations that they need. But I think the Braves, that to me, the Braves, it might not go down as a dynasty, but in the history of baseball, your group might have been one of the most dominant for a team that had so much change. And I think that's the coolest part.
You know what the Yankees did in their philosophy in '96? I found out later through Bob Watson, their hitting coach.
Yeah.
So we went on a historic run when we were down 3-1 to the Cardinals, and basically everyone wrote us off. Cardinals are celebrating like they won the World Series. Tony La Russa's team was having a good run, and then we caught fire. We won 3 straight games, and then win the first 2 games at Yankee Stadium, outscoring the team like 53-3 or 53-4, some crazy number, like numbers that don't make sense. But they're not sustainable. Mm-hmm. But in those first 2 games, my first game, we beat up Andy Pettit. I was up like 11-0 in the 5th, 6th inning, and I kept coming to the dugout saying, "These guys aren't swinging. Something's up. Like they're just not swinging." And that roster, if you remember, wasn't filled with a bunch of boppers. They didn't have a bunch of high total home runs, but they had a really good ball club, with the exception of 2 guys that would swing. Cecil Fielder would swing a lot, and so I kept thinking, all right, they're doing something. Well, after my game 5, of which I threw a 1-0 game and 142 pitches, hard to do in a 1-0 game.
Yeah.
They said, I said, Bob, I saw him later. I said, you got to tell me what in the world, how did you get all your guys to buy in? He goes, we told them, if we hang in there and make those starters work, if we get into the pen, we will win. He said, you got to get those guys out of there. And so it worked. I mean, that year, for me personally, I threw 256 innings and another 40 innings. We closed in on 300 in high stress postseason games. I was 4-0 going into that game 5, very confident. I had won the Cy Young that year. I'd already had success against the Yankees. It was an unearned run, basically because the extra umpire down the right field line wouldn't get out of the way of Jermaine Dye going after a fly ball. He runs into him and doesn't catch the ball, and Cecil Fielder ends up getting a hit after that. But that's the philosophy they had, and it worked. And you know how hard that is to get 9 guys to buy into a philosophy, but that's the team they had. That's the team that went on to kind of go on a nice stretch and win all those World Series.
You're damn right. And I love hearing these little baseball inside stories. And John, you have so many, and I could talk to you for hours, but we'll get to wrapping up here because maybe there's some fun experiences within the game. And one thing I got to know with the Braves, we just mentioned, obviously, the staples of that rotation. Another legendary individual part of that was Bobby Cox for being down there. Do you have any of your best Bobby moments throughout the years?
Yeah, there's so many. Look, I've run through a wall for that guy. I know he traded for me, but he was my manager for 20 years. And he understood what made me tick. He understood we would not take for granted any of his ability to let us be ourselves. He instilled confidence in players when we didn't have confidence. He was the ultimate leader. He took all the bullets. He got thrown out so many times for us, took all the criticism. People don't understand. He's a Hall of Fame manager, but he was getting crushed for a lot of things we just talked about, for not winning enough World Series. Right. But he was the architect of why we got there. He instilled confidence and put people in positions to be successful. I'll never forget. It sticks out like we called up Kelly Mann, pure hitter, not Kelly, man, Kelly Johnson. Kelly Johnson, good left-handed hitter, struggled mightily, like one for his first 30. And everyone was like, why is he leaving him in the lineup? Media all over him. He goes, his swing's too good. He's going to come out of it. And he just left him in there, and it turned around to be perfect. What Bobby got criticized for later in his career, he got applauded for, like too businesslike. We weren't flashy. We weren't emotional. We really were the essence of our manager. He had 3 rules: no music in the clubhouse or anywhere. Wear your headphones, wear your hat right, and show up on time. Those were it. If you couldn't play for that guy and abstain from doing those 3 things, you didn't deserve to be on any club, right? It's the only club that I've talked to and known that we had no music, because
Yeah.
his philosophy was simple. Why let music upset somebody, or the thought of it, in a clubhouse irritate somebody? Put on your headphones. You can listen to whatever you want to listen to. But what I felt was the most greatest story I could tell you of Bobby Cox. He did things that allowed us to be, you would get fired for today, 100% fired. Not to mention what he did for me in 1991, but I had a special circumstance in spring training. Tiger Woods, who I got a chance to play a lot of golf with.
Yeah.
I've told this story before. He called me on a Friday. It's about 2.5, 3 weeks before the Masters. We're in full-fledged spring training. He goes, hey, what are you doing Sunday morning? He goes, I got wheels up at, 8 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever it was. We're going to Augusta. We'll play, and I'll have you back by 3 p.m. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're killing me. Like, what are you doing? I got spring training. I said, but let me just give me a day. I got to talk to my manager. I got a light day actually on Sunday. Let's see what he says, but I don't think I can do it. So I hover his office, and I'm just like, hopefully nobody made him mad. And I go in there and I said, Bobby, here's the circumstances. I know the answer, but I have to ask you. And I totally understand if it doesn't work. And I lay it out and I tell him exactly the way it is. And he goes, Smoltzy, I'll see you on Monday. I just stood there for like 20 seconds, couldn't believe what I heard. Like, he said yes. And so I do it and I pull it off. You could never pull that off today. It's too much attention to social media.
Oh, for
But
sure.
nobody knew it. Nobody had a clue. My teammates were cool about it. Everybody knew, like, Bobby would set the position players in spring training, and the new ones like Mark Teixeira or Gary Sheffield or anyone we got. And he would call them in the office. And he said, you see those 3, 4 guys over there? He says, they're going to come in here and do their work. You're not going to see them much past 11 o'clock. And they're going to be gone playing golf. Deal with it, because that's how we're going to win. And because it would rub guys the wrong way. Can you imagine?
Oh, for sure.
We're doing our thing. We're gone by 11:30 at the latest, but we were in at 6:30. We're doing all our pre-work. He said, we're not going to shag. You're not going to do time killer stuff. It took guys in our organization weeks to get over the spring training easiness. He was like, they're going, really? Is this all it is? He said, Bobby's belief is get in, get out, do your work. Don't screw around. Because if you screw around, I'll make sure you're going to, get in and do your work. And we all did that at a level. It makes you actually work harder. It makes you want to be the best version you can, because you know it. Having been through it, if you got to sit in that outfield for 2 hours and shag balls, you're drifting, you're not paying attention, you're not motivated to do your sprints, do your workout. It was like the carrot for us. And that's the reason I stayed for 20 years. I gave up a lot of money. I had Yankee offers, Philly offers, I had all kinds of offers, and I became a free agent 4 times. And if I could work it out, I did, because that man was the reason and the freedom to be my best version of myself. And I was so grateful to do it for 20 years.
And that old school mentality reminds me, actually, maybe not to the full looseness of the stories I heard with Cal Sr., my grandfather, but the message: get in here, get your work done.
Yeah.
Get your work done. You do what you have to do. Then you're going to have the right to do what you want. But don't dilly-dally. You're here to work. Get your work in, and then life can be so much easier. In a day and age, too, John, I love it. You wanted to stay because you love that organization, but a specific individual allowed you to reach certain heights and be the best version that you could be on the baseball field.
Yeah.
And I think that's in today's day and age, just a reality. we just don't see that as much. We don't see managers in the same spot for as long as they used to be. We don't see teams financially maybe make the investments in guys, and people have to make the decisions. So hearing all of that, I always loved when a player, and I'm biased, I had a family member who did it for 21 years in one place, but I think also that's what made people come and know and love what you did, because you were a staple for that organization. And that means a lot to not only just the organization, but the fan base. Makes you feel a part of all of it. And that's really cool to hear what Bobby embodied with everything there. So then all the memories then, I mean, was the favorite one win the World Series? Or did you have anything? What World Series tops it by far? As good as you dreamed it was?
Yeah, I'm big into sports is sports, right? Competing. We've lost that. I mean, it's so backwards now. It's backwards in high school. It's backwards in 6-year-old baseball. It's backwards. It's just so sad. And I've spoken for years, and people look like I have nothing. I know not what I'm talking about. But the World Series is the greatest feeling in the world, to accomplish something as a team, to dogpile, to act like a fool. I actually had the greatest moment up until that World Series was in high school. It was in my final year, my final at bat, final tournament. We won the championship. Just it's kind of the DNA of who I am. I pitched on Fridays, complete game, Monday, complete game, pitched in relief on Wednesday, 5 innings in relief. It was the championship game against the number 2 ranked team in the state. And I was lucky enough in the bottom of the 8th in extra innings to hit a walk-off home run. And that feeling never left me of what that feels like, because the team and the school that I represented never had anything happen like that before. And to have that moment in time, I said, man, if I could get this at the next level, which is the big leagues, that's the ultimate prize. And we already talked about how hard it is to accomplish that and be part of it. But in 1995, that was something special. And we were all so close so many times. It was building into the Buffalo Bills conversation. The pressure on us was so great. And Glavine delivered one of the greatest games ever pitched. And that feeling just doesn't ever satisfy and feel like the fattened cat. Like, you want more of that feeling. You want more of those championships.
Yeah.
And to be able to do it and to come close again many more times afterwards, I would give up a lot of personal awards to get more championships. And
Yeah.
I think people think that today that would never exist. People want personal goals and acclimates and self-recognition and all the things that come along with. But we were all about a boring clubhouse with a boring manager with easy rules, and all we did was win. And so that truly is a memory I'll never forget. We have a reunion coming up. It's hard to believe it's been 30 years coming up. 30 years of the reunion of our World Series. Luckily, the Braves have won another one since. But when that one is your only championship the major cities ever had, it's electric. It changes things. And they convinced us in 1991 we were the outdoor champions and Minnesota was the indoor champions. Because, amazing, just to even go into it, like the Marlins have 2 championships, only been twice, right? People want to make that argument. Minnesota Twins have 2 championships, never won a road game. Think about the oddity of that. Like, there's a lot of things that go into the timing and place. And I won't go into the 1991, the dome and the air conditioning units and some of the feelings we had there about some fly balls that shouldn't have carried, but that's for another day.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm going to need that for another day. I'm with you on that. There was nothing like winning so hard at any level that you do it. Winning a championship, when you look back at it, there's only a handful of times if you get the opportunity, and you might only get a couple chances. You might only get one. And I bring up the story with my own family. If you had told my father in 1983, in his second year in the league, he wins MVP and they win the World Series, that'd be the last time that the Orioles would ever go to a World Series again. He would say, well, that's crazy. We'll be back. And the reality is it's hard to do. It's hard to get there. And then you got to embrace the moments that you have, because that is the last championship in Baltimore. That was 42 years ago.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, right?
And it's the same thing. You could say the same thing about the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1992.
Oh, yeah.
And 2 outs, one swing away. And who thought that would be the end virtually of that organization for a long time? Like they were the dominant 5-year run team that was going to pennants. And we had a historic run series against them in 91. We meet them up again in 92. We're up 3-1. They have a great comeback, and then one swing, one slide, and then gone. Like
Just
gone. They had a couple, I think, wild card experience, one or two in that since 1992, the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. So to your point, like you never know when that window is, and you never know what's going to be the kind of what's going to happen in the future. There's no guarantees. When you're young and you experience it, you think, I got plenty of time.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
when you look back, you go, what?
What
So
the hell
it's
happened?
crazy.
Where
Yeah.
did it all go? Well, last two things to get you out of here. What did you enjoy more? Breaking the saves record at the time or being a silver slugger in 2007?
You know what? That's a great question. I took so much pride in hitting. I love to hit. I know in the National League, they don't give you much of a chance to really work on it, but I'll tell you what, the Braves did give us a lot of time to help ourselves stay in the game and win a game with the bat. I had 5 home runs. I was having a great year, not 5 home runs in my silver slugger year, but I was having a great year at the plate. I tore my left shoulder on a swing. I swung for the
Oh,
downs all the time. I had nothing to lose, nothing to fear, but I couldn't keep two hands on the bat. And I felt it tear. I think I went one for my last 18. Like I couldn't swing at the anymore.
oh
Ended up
man.
winning a silver slugger. I had challenges with my position player teammates. I told them I'll take them on in home run competitions anytime they want. I had BP power, but that all ended right then. I no longer, I should have got that surgically repaired. I never did. Big mistake. It's the worst shoulder. I need a replacement shoulder now. But when you ask that question, it'd be easy for me to talk, and I always used to brag to I used to, with whenever I hit a home run, I would show up to the hitters meeting the next day and they would scream to get out of here, Smoltz. I said, what? I mean, I'm here, I'm a hitter. The saves record is pretty unbelievable story. It's a year's worth of stuff that went into that. People don't know the real story of what I went through. The cliff notes are, I didn't want to do it. I was forced to do it. It was the only way I could stay in Atlanta. I did it on my own after Tommy John receiving a tendonitis and as a starter, coming back, telling Bobby, let me go to the minors. I'll work out as as a reliever. I'll just help the ball club in any way I can. And then lo and behold, the last month I become the closer, and then that's how they signed me. Well, that next year, I had a really bad thumbnail for the longest time, like an ingrown thumbnail that I complained about. And I finally said, we got to do something about it. They cut off half my thumbnail. It was awful. I
Oh,
had 4 surgeries. I developed staph infection. I had to learn how to grip a baseball the different way. It went bad. And here I am doing a new role. I go to spring training, can't pick up a ball. I only get 6 innings in, and I have to fake it the first month of the season. I'm getting booed. People said this is horrible. It's not going to work. I gave up 6 runs in 2/3 of an inning, and my manager knew it. And I just had to kind of get going. Once I got used to it, I would figure it out. If you were to tell me that year, with all that was going on, all the different things going on with my thumb, that I would end up with 55 saves, I'd say you need to go to see some help. So to get 55 saves that year, to transform a horrific first month, it truly is one of the most gratifying situations of perseverance and overcoming, because nobody knew. I had to fake it. And then when I got on a roll, I got on a pretty good roll. The amount of opportunities were astronomical. um, I thought it was never going to happen. I got to September with plenty of time to get whatever the record was, and it just dried up. And then lo and behold, against the Mets, I believe it was the National League record against the Mets.
mhm.
My 200th win was against the Mets. My first one, like there's so much history with me in the Mets that it just, to be that statistically, I guess, successful in my first year, cemented my idea of going back to the starting rotation. I didn't really want to do this full time. And I thought that I would be in a role, if even if it's the role I didn't like, I learned to like, that I would save the 300th game of Glavine and the 300th game of Maddox. How cool would that be? And then they both leave. And I'm stuck in a position where I don't want to be, and they're gone. And now I'm trying to figure out, how do I navigate this new role, waiting to pitch? Our rotation drastically changed. So what ended up happening after 3 years, not winning one, we never lost a, when I was healthy as a starter, we never did we not get through a first series. But as the closer, we never won a series. And so it's the chicken and the
Hmm.
egg. You know, my general manager would say, well, what's more important? I said, well, Mariano Rivera is special and the best we have. But the Yankees, being the Yankees, getting to Mario Rivera, making him that, yeah, what if Mario Rivera never got to those situations? Would we think of him in the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I convinced them to allow me to go back to starting. Again, the world thought I was crazy. Um, I started off slow, but ended up making the All-Star team that year. Pitched 238 innings. When people said you couldn't get to 200, it's just, that's kind of the story of my career. I'm not a guy that says if you can't, it motivates me extra, but it does help when
Oh yeah.
somebody says you can't do something. And I just a big believer in putting forth my plan and then executing it and learning from it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you executed that pretty well. By the way, the year you didn't win Silver Slugger, to finish that one off, uh, in 1999, you hit 274. By the way, you hit 274 and 228 when you, I think, won the Silver Slugger.
Yeah.
I think that they should have let you hit John more personally. And then on the closing side, that to me is so impressive because for everything, I didn't know all the other crap you just went through there. And then all of a sudden you go out there and do something historic that is brand new for you to do. And then your next 2 years after that also were pretty darn good. You didn't have as many saves, but the ERA, the numbers were dynamite. So maybe one of these days you're gonna have to explain to me the bulldog mentality that you developed over time. But to close it all out here, John, um, is there anything when you look back and you reflect? Is there one thing that you miss about it, the game specifically, or that's something that kind of in hindsight that you really appreciate?
Yeah, I miss the playoffs. I miss the big games, the moment that you walk to the park knowing you can impact your club. I miss being a great teammate, you know, pumping the guys up, being there for them, giving the best of myself, and encouraging and motivating them to be greater. I miss that camaraderie that, you know, obviously competition is what I'm always going to miss. And we have a shelf life in that. That's why golf gives you a longer life line to compete. But what I'm most appreciative of is the opportunities that I was presented as a player. The platforms and the stage were too big, but I honored it and respected it. And what I was able to do off the field is probably, I'm as proud of that than I am as you know, my numbers will live forever and you can look it up. But the impact in the community, the charities, the giving back, making a difference. My parents always taught me about making a difference wherever you're at. And I was passed the torch indirectly by Alan Trammell when I got to the Tigers. You know this, your dad knows this. The game was brutal when it came to rookies. It was always like make them feel terrible, put them through the car wash, make them do everything, and then that indirectly passes it on. They keep repeating that. So it's a bitter experience. Well, Alan Trammell, when I was in that fish out of water in the Tiger Stadium, sitting in a locker, and just nobody knew who I was. And they're like, I guarantee the big leaguers like, who's this little snot? And why is he following us around? He came up to me. He took his hand out. He didn't know I knew everything about Alan Trammell. My high school number was 3. I idolized Alan Trammell. And when you meet your player, I know it's not always the best experience when someone meets the player they idolize because it could have been a bad day. It could not have been the experience they want. He shook my hand. He said, my name is Alan Trammell. If there's anything I can do for you while you're here, don't hesitate to ask. And what he did is set that for me to play it forward. You know, he gave me the baton indirectly to make it easier for a rookie, to make it better, to care for him. And I used to go up to our veteran players that were the curmudgeons And I said, who ruined it for you? That's all I had to say. And they would pop that name out immediately because they knew who made life miserable for them. It
Yeah,
stuck with them. And in turn, they repeated that. Not everybody. And so to make a difference and to make the environment, the community, the clubhouse better is really what I'm most proud of, because those are the intangibles that carry on long after your legacy or just statistics that you can amass.
for sure. It's giving it forward, trying to make a difference for someone else. And what I've heard from players, you miss being a part of it, but you also miss what made it special. And it usually is those people. And I love that story. That's a great one to end with Alan Trammell, because that helped you build yourself up with a little bit of confidence. And then years later, you can provide that same thing for the next person that's coming up to try to figure out themselves. Cause you never know, maybe they're trying to build their own confidence, and you never know what someone's dealing with. So John, I'm going to have to talk to you about baseball a whole lot more at a different point. But I really appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for coming on.
Let's do it again. My pleasure.